Michelle Germain, one of our newest members, right down there in the red t-shirt. Oh, myself, Andy Knapp, I'm here, and Ann Peterson, in the purple. We are all present and accounted for.
We approve last month's agenda. Everybody can go over that?
We made a motion to approve the agenda. Okay.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passed.
Copies of the minutes are out there for anybody, and there's also copies of the agenda at the front table by the sign-in sheet. Please make sure you sign if you haven't done it when you clock that in.
Hi.
Hi. Are you working for them now?
Mr. Kyle O'Mara's here, or he's our attorney from the township, who will be helping us.
Approval of the minutes for,
Yep.
You picked it up last night, the night before, that I saw the hard time you stood up.
Did at least I stood up to him. He got me all befuddled, though I didn't say what I wanted to say.
sign? Motion passed. Our old business, we reviewed the changes to the wind ordinance. The single use home, we were just getting started on, and kind of we want to go over that. We also went over the number of days to resolve complaints, the DBA, the LMAX, and the DBC, with better definitions in there. Adequate review time for the PC on application material, and then the later setbacks. And then, what, I don't know, it was brought up about the moratorium on the wind turbine special land use permit. So, has anybody got anything else to add on to that? No, but I think we decided to go over that, we've gotta go over the single use, single ways. We gotta figure out what we're gonna do for the ordinance on that. I think we kinda took both of them, trying to figure out the best way to go about it. Is this the one that they see you have printed up here?
The single sheet of paper is what we're looking at right now.
And then we have one that's already,
This is it.
oh, that's the one
This
right
is,
here?
yes. This is, that's all that is in there.
Okay, what about the one that we had for the ordinance?
So, what
That
they're
was,
talking
that
about
was.
is, so this is this year's zoning ordinance right now, that relates to non-utility turbines. Current, this exists.
No, that was part of when we put it in the statement. It wasn't part of it at all. That little section that we were talking
That
about.
little section was, just way back, a long time ago, was a section that was, proposed by
Yeah, and it wasn't any, we never, it was less than this.
it was less than this, so I think this is
Less
a
than
good.
the current one.
Would you like to know my thoughts on how to maybe adjust this, at least to start the discussion, or would you like to start? I'm happy.
No, we'd be more happy to listen to what
Okay,
you have to say.
so this section, already exists in your zoning ordinance related to individual, non-utility scale turbines that can be on, you can go to Menards or whatever and buy it for your farm. Right now, the standards are 170 feet, setback one time from the maximum height of the, I would consider this tip height, but it's not specified. Blade clearance of 20 feet, And because this is less than 200 feet, it would not require a blinking light. It should have an automatic braking system. I'm not sure, based on my independent research, if many of the ones that you can buy at, for example, at Menards would have that. I would have to do some research. That's just a thought.
Well, this does say at the bottom that is including the full extension of the vertical blade, so,
Yeah.
so wouldn't that be tip height then?
Are you talking about 3,
Number
I'm
one.
talking about D1,
D1?
at the last sentence, it says including the full extension of the vertical blade.
Yes, but
So-
what my concern is, and I think I talk too fast sometimes, so that is a problem. Number 2, it talks about setback 1 times the height of the maximum height of any portion
Oh,
of the
okay, so-
structure. I believe that would mean tip height.
Okay, so that's where we need a better clarification.
I would maybe say tip height. The problem is if you don't have tip height defined in your zoning ordinance, this actually does the fine job of saying, because the maximum height of the structure, in my opinion, would be the tip height.
Yeah,
So I think we can keep it the same, but that's just, I just wanna point that out, that it's different than how we talk about things in the draft we've been working on for utility scale. 20 feet blade clearance, to me, that seems okay, especially for the purposes of one of these. I don't think in most instances, you won't have many of these on a parcel. And they would be on, obviously, it would be on someone's parcel who wants one. Going on for automatic, so I was talking about automatic braking system, I would have to do some research to see if that is common for a,
Actually, they can lock the switches up on it, and that's what breaks them, that's what keeps them turning.
the personal ones will have that.
Okay.
Automatic though?
It's not automatic, it's a manual
Yeah.
override on it, so that, like if you wanted to do any kind of maintenance or do something that you don't want to, you could lock it out that way, but no, I don't think they
You're
have
probably doing
an
it.
automatic.
So that would be something to think about, whether you have, especially for agricultural properties in your township, that have these. And to be honest, you may have, some of these exist already without an automatic braking. I mean, that's just gonna be a fact, especially if it's not, generally required. Wind towers shall have lightning protection, so that's 4. Going to, the wind energy system shall be maintained in suitable working order, so that would be, I think, a reasonable regulation to limit noise and prevent debris that would affect the personal use and enjoyment of adjacent, I would say, properties. If I was just being, especially if we're going to amend this. The system shall not cause noise in excess of 55 decibels beyond an adjoining property line. I would recommend that you would change that to your, whatever you propose is.
45.
Okay.
It's
170, so I did a little bit of digging, and I see you can buy them that are 127, 140 feet from an so in my opinion, what you would want to do is, I think you would want to think about something that's not in here of perhaps making them be a certain distance from each other on a parcel, or they need to be on a certain parcel size. What this doesn't do, but it implicitly does because it has setback requirements. But what it doesn't do is it doesn't specify, and these are accessory uses, whether I can have, 5 personal turbines on a parcel. And you may wanna consider, I've seen accessory uses sometimes where, you can have one of these for every 5 acres or something. Generally, you're not gonna have someone, I think it would be uneconomic to have 10 of the, because you can't serve offsite customers, so I don't know what you would do with much of these, but, it's just a thought.
Now, do you have any idea how big these things are around?
They're not big, so what I've seen, they're generally guide wire, so unlike a utility scale turbine, they're kind of like a guide wire. How I compare it to is if you had like an antenna, like a TV antenna that had a guide wire frame on it, and then it has a little, for most part, they're kind of a little kind of turbine blade on the top.
Well, my neighbor's got one, and that thing's probably 36-inch blade,
Yeah.
and it's only, I wanna say, maybe 15 feet off the ground. So, that kind of tells me, and he's right on the property line, he's already not compliant.
Yeah,
So, what, 107 feet, that's a long ways up too.
It's pretty far up, and what I'll say is, you know, a lot of people, so for example, in a wind ordinance that I think people would say is permissive or along those lines, that the Gratiot County ordinance, I think limits them to 100 feet.
There's those if you
But
want them.
at the same time,
I think it's lower than normal.
yeah, it's really a personal, I mean, not personal preference, but a commission decision.
Well, I would think if we lowered that down to 100 feet, and if they wanted to, then get a rate of variance.
Yeah, they could get a-
Could,
they could get a-
but I would say, why don't we lower that down to 100 feet? Does that sound good to everybody?
And do we limit the number on, I mean, do we do one for 3 acres, or what's anybody's feeling?
I would do, so let's think about it, let's say if someone is a individual property owner,
That's the same
and they
way,
weren't,
too.
they weren't a farmer, and you want one of these, and I think it probably is socially acceptable to have one of these here. Whether you would think it would be appropriate to have on 2 acres, 3 acres, I think it would probably be appropriate on 3 acres, just, that's my gut feeling, but it's really, I think, you know, you viewing your community and what,
That's kinda crazy too. I would like it back a little bit farther than that, I would think.
It's gonna be 100. So then do
What,
2 times?
what do you guys think around, the setback, 1.5, 2 times on that? Property line? I mean, it's no different than, the commercial actually, you're still dealing with the same possibilities of damage.
correct,
I think 2 times is okay.
Yep, I do
2
too.
times the height.
I think that's feasible for,
Everybody think 2 times is okay?
That's what the other has, yeah.
I think it's a reasonable regulation.
I don't see where.
Yeah, the other one does have 2 times, so.
If they wanna have a lower one, yeah.
Didn't you say it when ours, that the, going back to the 100 feet height limit? Did you say they usually come in 120 feet?
You can get them a 121,
Can
I've
get
seen
them,
it, yeah, I mean, in my experience, I'm not sure if I've seen too many farms with a taller one. I think what Roger was saying, potentially you could get a variance if you wanted to build a taller one.
Oh, okay, I see.
Um,
All right.
But rather than not to exceed.
I don't know if you would, I don't, on that note though, generally you can't have, I mean, it would be a the way how variances work is you shouldn't, you generally shouldn't grant a variance if the problem is, I don't wanna say it's a problem, but if it's created itself by the landowner. And so, where you typically would grant a variance, so let's say you wanna give a reduced setback because this person's property in the front is unbuildable and he needs to build his home closer to the road than normal. Here it's kind of, I just wanted to build something taller.
When I look at the one that's over here on Gravel Ridge, is the guy that's got the ham radio tower over there.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's pretty tall right there. When you think about a setback of 2 times from the property line, and I'd be pushing it, I think, a little bit there even, so. I really think that 100 feet, that's above, almost above the trees.
2 times, you're probably not gonna be able to do it on a 3 acre parcel. 100 feet, that's 200 feet, 3 acre parcel is gonna be smaller than that, unless it's very, see, even if it's a long, it's gonna be narrow, you're not gonna be able to do it.
200 feet both ways, though, you know, that's.
You're not gonna be able to do it, go 400 feet,
So, I mean, I guess that's.
3 acres ain't gonna cut it.
But that's the setback. I think that the size of the property is gonna have to go by what we make for that setback, and I really.
Unless you put up something, not as tall, I don't know how we could work that, if you,
Well,
because,
that is something, that's a very good point that you're saying.
because you can get above,
Smaller one.
you can get above most of your trees, you get 60 feet above most of the trees, above top of trees. If you were to put one up 70 feet tall,
That one that's right next to me, that is only 20 foot off the ground.
how much wind are they catching?
It's going almost all the time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but what, my point is, if you're up there 70 feet, you're gonna catch
You're
it
gonna
all the
catch a
time.
lot of wind.
And that's, if you did 2 times, that's 140 feet.
Right.
You might be able to do that on 3 acres.
tower height to what your setback.
Exactly.
And that somewhat makes sense, because when you're on a smaller parcel, it's probably more well, how you view height is from two frameworks. I think you would view it from safety to, you know, your structures you have on your own parcel, and then potentially from aesthetics. The setback somewhat, I think, would reduce any aesthetic diminishment, if you feel it's an aesthetic diminishment. So, for a smaller parcel, what I'm basically saying is, it may work in conjunction if you make the setback like a 2 times, it may be appropriate to have smaller towers on smaller parcels, because the one sentence they could have said is before I said.
And you know, you can go by the size difference that way too. I mean, if you can only get 7-foot tower on the property that you own, and that's just gonna lower it down. It makes sense to me.
Well, yeah, if somebody wants to put one up a nail and a half, acre and a half, they're gonna have to have a
Well,
pretty
they
sure
have,
tower.
yeah, they have like that one, it's just above the garage roof, you know.
Yeah. Exactly.
Is everybody in agreement on that then? 2 times the height?
That's what the Gratiot County has, just, so, right now, we have one, you guys have 1 time, and I know there's groans in the crowd, depending on, you know, who you are.
What if you put this on top of the building?
If you put this on top of a building, then
You have to-
it would,
You have to put the building in with the tower, and if the tower is 10 feet, then the building's 15 at 25 feet.
I would have to read your zoning ordinance, because if you put it on top of a tower, not tower, building, then that might be, the height of that might be the entire structure height, and there's zoning height, depending on your zoning district, there's height regulations in your zoning district. And that might be.
It says in here measured from the ground.
Yes, but the point I'm trying to make is that there might be other, provisions in your zoning ordinance that I would have to check. That certain structures can only be a certain height, and so like a pole barn, and then you had a 50-foot tower on top
The
of it.
structural integrity of the building.
But does it address putting a tower on the top of the building?
Does that happen very, I know for antennas,
Yeah, that's happening all the time.
Like I said, they wanted to put it down there with a fence to the side of the garage.
Yeah, but what my point is if you put it on top of the building, is it gonna be a problem for us, because is it part of the building, or is the building part of the tower?
Well, and there is on our ordinances here about the structural integrity of even like the solar. If you put up a solar panel on your roof, it's gotta have an engineer say that the building is structurally sound enough to hold it.
Well, sure, yeah, well, that makes sense, I mean, I wouldn't do
Same
it
way
either.
with a tower for a turbine that would
Yeah, wouldn't that be covered in the first one though? So the wind energy system, if it's mounted, that tower's part of the system, cannot exceed the height more than 100.
Yep.
So you'd have to take count the height of the building.
I agree that would apply, and there's potentially other sections.
If your building is 40, you can only feet high, you can only get a
60-foot
60-foot
tower
tower.
on top of it, if you're gonna do it.
Because that'd be the base, that'd be part of the system. It's only 100 foot, so.
In the zoning book, it does say that if something like an accessory structure as a garage or whatever is attached to the dwelling, it has to comply with, all the requirements of that. So if you put it on your house, you have a maximum height for your house, so you couldn't go over that, so you'd be worse off doing that. If you were trying to get height, you wouldn't be able to go by that.
I think it typically, at least from what I've seen, if you put something like this on the top of your structure, it's not usually a, 50-foot tower from.
Well, that'd be stupid, but
Yeah. So
who knows?
So they build a garage, barn up over that structure out there by Satterley Road. Huckins Place.
What do?
They build a barn around this tower, that tower goes up in the air probably 150 feet.
Oh, I see.
That's right on Coral Road after you pass Satterley, right on the gravel part.
Yeah, I had
That's Pine Township though.
Oh, okay, that's why, they'll get it. Go that way, something like that. I don't know, it just leaves questions, to me, it does anyway.
Now, I don't know if that, one that's next to my house even has a governing system on it, because I'll tell you, that thing.
Gets the width, that could be a problem too.
Yeah, that really gets going, so.
That's why it'd be a problem with your decibels too, and them small turbines, to my knowledge, they don't have brakes. So what if somebody puts one up, it's gonna, and they do spin fast if you don't have a braking system, my son's got one, and, you won't be able to regulate the
So
noise.
that's a very good point,
So-
and, this is something that I talked about, just, in our office, about when you impose a decibel regulation on something like this. I mean, this isn't, a utility coming, applying all sorts of site plans and stuff. You will only know if it's violating this decibel requirement if you do some sort of testing. Right, and, so I would consider thinking about, I think how you guys are approaching it is right, by making the setbacks larger, and then reducing the height, because the fact that most townships aren't going to have the ability to do accurate decibel testing, for a use like this. I mean, that's just that's kind of the fact of the matter, because you're not gonna, I think it would be inappropriate to require an escrow deposit for someone having their own individual, turbine they bought from Menards. So you want to have sort of a belt and suspenders approach, where you have these standards in here that would basically monitor the sound, or at least mitigate the sound by traditional setbacks. And that's typical how you treat other land uses, like a salvage yard, for instance. You may require a salvage yard to be certain different setbacks, or a gravel pit, but you may not have a decibel amount, like when wind and other renewable ordinances, like solar, are pretty unique in the sense that they do impose these.
Well, and even here on 6, the wind energy system shall comply with all applicable state construction codes and comply with federal aviation administration requirements.
Yeah,
And all that in there, I mean, that's kind of stating that it's like going back to you're gonna put one on your house. That's gonna go back to, it's gotta be approved for the structural integrity of the house, all of that.
correct.
I think that kind of covers what we were just talking about there. Any comments?
Did we want to limit the number that you can put on a parcel, or no? Because we never did discuss that. You want to limit the number
I think
that
that each
somebody
one,
can have?
I think each one should have its own special land use, just like if they're gonna have, any other one.
Well, that's a good thought, because right now they're permitted as an accessory use. So someone basically would just have to show up to the township and say, I meet the dimensional requirements, and they would get a zoning compliance permit, presumably from Dave, and they could just build it. So do you think the planning commission should review these under special use?
I would think so, because the guy obviously didn't have to do anything when he put the one up across my, back side of my property, so wouldn't it be better to have it as special land use?
I've seen it both ways. I would say majority of communities have it as accessory uses, but when I'm talking about majority of communities, it's probably a majority of agricultural communities. But I'd say it's like a 60-40 split, so it's pretty close. I think it's appropriate to make it as a special land use. I think the other thing you could think of is you could require them to submit a
Site plan?
Yeah, like a plot plan, I would call it a plot plan, special, for an accessory use. How many of these do you have in your town? I know you're mentioning one.
Yep.
If there's not many, it might just be worth it to make this special use.
If they're small like the one next to him, though, you might not even see it going down the road because it's behind their house, you know?
And something that you just,
You don't see,
So the thing to think about, if you make it a special use, that would require you would have to do like any special use. You'd have to hold a public hearing. You would have to notice everybody 300 feet from the parcel whenever they're applying for one. A person applying for one would have to pay a special use permit fee. So there's things to think about, whether I would think about from the framework of what types of burdens it puts on adjacent property owners, and then also the burden you want to put on someone who wants one of these.
But I think that gives all the neighbors around the chance to say, hey, I'm no, I don't want it, or.
Correct.
You're gonna have to have public opinion on that too, because, I mean, it's no different than starting a garage or, you know, putting a store in or anything else, you gotta at least allow your neighbors to have a little input. That's what they did with Jason out there to Scout Place. That's everything out there now, just cause there's a lot of concern and you got to speak their mind on it, so. You guys wanna make it special land use or leave it as an accessory?
We've got special land use for that.
Okay.
It is kind of special land use.
I would like so. Everybody's gotta look at that too.
Can regulate the number on them too though, because of the setback.
Right.
They got so far down the line, if they're only so big, they can only put.
Right. So if you got somebody with
Somebody
40
else.
acres, they put more in.
Yeah.
That's the other benefit about special land use, is exactly what Lee's saying, is then, you know, let's say someone already has two of these on their property, they're applying for another special land use, and then you think about their property as a specific location and whether that would be excessive.
It probably should be a special land use, so that's what it is.
So put it to a vote.
Move motion to single private system is special land use.
Anybody second that?
A second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Special land use.
Okay, on that note, what zoning district would you want them to be in? I think
Well,
probably,
you know, it's probably gonna be, I would say because of the size of the lot you would need, it's almost gonna have to be agricultural. No, you can't, you don't have
Setback
enough room.
automatically out down the height setback.
Yeah. I'd say it's probably gonna have to be a zone that's agricultural.
and that probably makes, to me, that makes sense from,
Most of our land around here is agricultural.
and the purpose of these is to generally serve agricultural properties for the most part, or maybe what I would call rural residential,
Right.
but yeah, that would probably be an agricultural district.
That's something to think about that.
I have a question on 6.
Yeah,
It says an interconnected wind energy system shall comply with Michigan Public Service Commission and federal energy regulations. These are not interconnected to
right,
anything,
I
are they?
don't think that should be.
I would
in there.
take that out, and then I would maybe specify that these should be for on-site. I would have to go
On-site use
on-site
only,
with this.
On-site use, you can't say really on-site use only because they still gotta be hooked into the grid, because if the windmills ain't making, or turbines ain't making energy, they still gotta pull energy off from the grid. So, you know, you can't, and like they were explaining to us, I think, one time you might have, where you're getting 110% of the energy, and other times you might only get 40%. So with them being hooked to the grid still, I mean, interconnected, I don't know if that's the right wording.
I would recommend you can address that is you go to the definition of wind energy system. You would make it so that what I've seen in other places is, the primary purpose is for on-site,
Use only.
use only.
Yeah,
And
you
then-
have a
and then if you have
dump load on
special-
it to get rid of the extra.
Right.
Yeah,
Or like well, they have different types, like long coil round thing, and anything extra just
Or bank.
goes away.
Well, mine says, fully on-site is different.
And that last sentence kind of goes out.
They're trying to,
Yes, well, on-site consumer-based systems are exempt from this requirement.
I think from my end, you would want to remove that sentence above it though, because I don't think you want these to
So
be,
the interconnected, that sentence is gonna be removed.
I would remove that, yes.
Yes.
Because I don't think you wanna make any inference that these should be, basically connected to utility use, yeah. The ironic thing is, if you go to D, it says on-site consumer-based non-utility wind generator. Well, I would probably should fix out, it's kind of,
It's a little wordy.
yeah.
should it just say on-site consumer-based wind turbines, or should it just say on-site non-utility?
I would say wind energy system, so what I would do is I would amend, I try not to be complicated, but this will make it simpler. I would amend the definition section of your zoning ordinance to define wind energy system, and then I would remove all of that and say wind energy systems are permitted as
Okay,
special land uses, and then the other thing you'll have to do, and Andy just let go of the help, is you would have to move this to special land use, like a chapter of the zoning
okay,
ordinance
so
from
then
where
I'll have to figure out
we're,
which
yeah,
section it needs to be moved to.
yes.
So that's that wind, utility wind turbine. And then, wind energy facility is kind of what's making it differentiate.
So what it's, put this in, what would differentiate it is you would define the term wind energy system as in your definition section, you give it a specific meaning, which would basically
We
be,
already have one in there,
yes, I could use that.
so that one, so is that what we want to use?
Yeah, that's,
In there.
it shows it as an individual
Single
component of
energy,
wind
place
energy
on the term.
conversion
So
system.
that's what I like,
I like what
that.
this,
That's a good
how
thing.
this explains it, that it only serves as the energy needs of only upon the lot that it's placed. So,
And you say intend because you want, it's just like if you have like the rooftop solar or something, you may sell energy back if for whatever reason it generates more than, on an agricultural property, I would doubt it would generate more than you need, but maybe it could.
Depending on probably the time of year. Kind of depending on what time of year.
Yeah, that's true too.
I think we're pretty happy with all business on B there, right? Because we discussed the lake setbacks.
Did we talk about the, so number of days to resolve complaints?
no, that's,
Oh, okay, alright.
And that's, C that you were talking about, discussing the special thing.